Tell us about the GT program when you were in elementary, when you were in inner city Houston.
Okay, well, all I really remember, I wasn't allowed to do kindergarten because the school that I went to, kindergarten was for kids that didn't speak English. So they spent a year trying to teach these kids English so they could just get into first grade. So there was like an extra year there where I wasn't in school and a lot of other kids were. So then I started first grade, and I don't know what they did as far as how they placed people at that school I was at, but I know that I was in all the way through fourth grade. I was in the class with like what were considered maybe the smarter kids in the grade. Yeah, and I don't know how they did that, but I definitely knew that I was in that class, like even as a first, second, third, and fourth grader. But in fourth grade, I moved out to Katy, kind of the suburbs, and they had this program called GT, which that didn't exist at the school I was at. And so when we moved out there and said, well, I was at the higher level class in inner city Houston, they were like, well, you still have to take the exam. So I did, and I did make it into that program. The biggest thing I remember, elementary is so much different than junior high or high school as far as the GT program. There was like a separate class where like we would leave our normal class during the day and go to like a GT segment. And like I remember we focused on, one of our focuses was China. Like we just learned a lot about China in fifth grade, and I didn't know why. But I remember GT being fun. It was always like they challenged us more, let us be more creative, make videos and things like that, whereas in the other classes, not so much. So
did you get bored when you were in the other classes? And like,
yeah,
so
yeah, definitely.
Junior high, you were in GT classes. Did they test you in junior high, or did you just go because go to GT because you were in GT in elementary?
Yeah, I don't remember being tested. Somehow I think it just kind of carried through to junior high and then again to high school. But junior high was, I think I did take a test for like math, whether I should skip a year of math or not and go straight to algebra or whatever. There was like some test where you could like skip 2 years of math and take algebra in like 7th grade. Did that, and I could have done it, but my parents weren't comfortable with that, so I only skipped like 1 year. And that was what most kids did, I think, that were in the GT program. But and it was like the kids who skipped 2 years, that was like a really big deal. That was like, oh, like, but it was like, well, I could have, but my parents didn't let me, you know. And
Did you know your parents didn't let you?
I was kind of bitter about that. Yeah, my mom was like, no.
Why did she not want you to?
Some teacher advised her that if I skipped, it was like a pre-algebra class is what I ended up taking, and the advice was if I skipped that, there were some basics that I was never gonna get taught, and that was gonna come back and bite me in high school. Yeah, right. So my mom was like, no. So.
What about whenever you got in high school? How did the GT program change?
Yeah, it became a really big deal in high school because then it was you were on a 5-point scale instead of everybody else was on a 4-point scale, like the classes that you took. And at that point, you could drop out of the GT program, pre-AP. Right, so we're talking about pre-AP kids now, and that was like you had to like ask to be in the pre-AP classes, I think.
Yeah.
And
Katie.
Yeah, and so the GT kids who we'd kind of grown up together, all these new kids started to be in our class, and we were like, who are these kids? They're not one of us. They're not they're not on our level, you know. And so they called it, you know, it said on our progress report card or whatever, GT pre-AP English, geometry, whatever it was. So I dropped the English, but I stayed pre-AP because you had to read like 12 books. And if it's not Twilight, right, why would you read? If it's not Harry Potter or Twilight, then
why waste your time?
Why would you read a book? So
yes.
Anyway.
Twilight.
I'm not going to the midnight showing on Thursday, by the way.
It's okay.
That's today.
Tonight.
Anyway.
Tonight's Thursday. So anyway, the high school deal, you were competing for college now. I mean, you were on like I said, the 5-point scale, and it got really competitive, super competitive. But it was no longer like, you're special, let's really develop your brains and treat you, better than everyone else. But there was that, like, oh, you're taking an academic class. They called it academic. There's like GT pre-AP and there was academic. And I was like, oh, you're taking academic? Like, you must be dumb. Like, you're gonna end up going to tech because you're taking academic courses. I'm serious.
Yes. So you're in the pre-AP GT classes.
Right.
So did they do different things than the academic classes? Like, when you were in junior high and elementary, you got to leave and do different things. But the GT pre-AP class, was it more advanced things? Was it more projects? Was it more than academic kids?
Yeah, I think, when I did drop from my GT pre-AP English to regular English, it was kind of like,
wow.
Yeah, it was a joke, and it wasn't
like pushing.
It was boring. Yeah. It was. We'd read a book at such a slow pace, and it was an easier book, and it was. But I remember making videos in the one before I dropped it, and I had a good time doing that, and just having like I said before, like challenging us to be creative and things like that. So there was still a lot of that. Some of that, the math classes were definitely challenging. I remember, and I ended up taking calculus my senior year, and taking the AP Calc test was easy, so easy. That was the easiest exam that I took in calculus all year, was the AP exam. Like my test that I took just in my regular class were way harder than that AP Calc test. And so, I was appreciative of that after I took the AP exam, but I did not. I mean, calculus was tough my senior year. I took like an AP history course in my junior year of high school, and that course was harder than History 105 here at A&M, by a lot.
So do you think being in GT program helped or benefited you later on in life, through college and stuff?
Oh yeah, especially the first 2 years here in college, where you're taking mostly the same courses anyway, as everybody else, the generic courses that everyone pretty much has to take. Because I had so much background. When you take 141, I placed out a 142 math. But just having a background and some of the classes that I took in high school, I remember being harder than, or maybe it was just taking them made it a lot easier to take these courses in college, for sure. I was lucky to be in the school I was at, and
have a GT program.
Having a GT program and offering those college courses, the dual credits, the GT pre-APs, the AP courses, letting you get hours out of the way and just making college a lot easier.